So you wanna tell me about your bad dreams?
It's always the same.
Your dad. We're never gonna be able to move forward until you deal with some of the mess you left in your head.
My father was a monster. You know that.
Everyone called it an accident, but it wasn't until years later when those 5 children went missing that I knew she was murdered by him.
Are you ever gonna go back to Freddy's, I mean?
I think my sister is here.
Where are you gonna run to?
What do they want with my sister? Half of this town will be dead by morning.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Join me as always. It's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, horror gamers. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. It's Sunday. I got tomorrow off, so I'm actually mildly relaxed. And I just found out I'm going to Disneyland a couple of days before Christmas, so I'm mildly excited for that. So yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How the hell are you doing?
I'm doing well, just relaxing. It's pretty cold up here, so getting under blankets is what the plan is, and watching movies other than the one we're discussing today. Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. What's up, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
All right, so this week in the theater, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 opened, obviously based on the video game as the original was. This one, I guess, gets into more of the lore. So those, I guess, familiar with the games will pick up on that. And let's see. The IMDb synopsis is kind of funky. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is reopened with new versions of the animatronics and the same animatronics from the previous Freddy Fazbear restaurant. That's not really a synopsis. We have another one. Let's see. A year has passed since the supernatural nightmare at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The stories about what transpired there have been twisted into a campy local legend, inspiring the town's first ever Faz Fest. When Abby, of course the girl from the original, tries to reconnect with her animatronic friends, it sets into motion some terrifying events, and it reveals the origin of Freddy's, I guess. That's good enough. All right. So, general thoughts on FNAF 2 Venom. Tell us.
All right. Well, for longtime listeners, if you remember our review of the first one, you remember that I just famously hated that first movie. I am a gamer. I am familiar with at least a few of the Five Nights at Freddy's games, like the first two, what Security Breach, and I played a little bit of one of the Most Wanted ones too, but otherwise, I still come at these more as a movie viewer and not as a geeked out gamer who just wants to see all these video game characters come to life. And unfortunately, a lot about what I said about the first movie pretty much holds for this one as well. They basically took one of the scariest, most atmospheric, and most tension-filled video games ever and gave us a movie that was neither scary, nor tense, nor atmospheric. And unfortunately, we get the same thing with this one. Just a lot of the same, PG-13 horror trappings that we get. Bloodless kills, boring kills, off-screen kills. Very obviously, Blumhouse is trying to make this a gateway horror franchise, something that younger people would want to get into. But ultimately, what I don't understand is that people who played the original Five Nights at Freddy's, which is about what, 15 years old now, they're not fucking kids anymore. They're fucking adults. They're like in their 30s. So why are you making horror movies for 15-year-olds if you're trying to appease the fans of the original game? Now, obviously, the folks over at Blumhouse are trying to get as many butts in seats. And guess what? It fucking worked, because this movie has opened with an almost $55 million opening weekend, which is just insane to me. Another thing that's really striking about this is the Rotten Tomatoes score for this movie. The Rotten Tomatoes score is 12%, which means critics just unanimously hate this movie. But the fan score is 88%. I have never seen that much of a disparity between critics and fans in my life. So, I mean, are Five Nights at Freddy's fans maybe not ultra bright? I don't know, because I count myself among those numbers, and I'd like to think that I'm fairly bright. But yeah, I cannot get into these movies. I will say, and it's not really saying much, I think I enjoyed this one just a tad more than the first one, but it is still an endlessly flawed movie that really just doesn't understand the point of the video games and what made those games so just tense and atmospheric, like I said. I will say that there was a couple of set pieces in here that kind of worked for me, including our cold open. There's a shot in the cold open of Freddy Fazbear chasing his first victim down a dark hallway, and in this darkened hallway, all you can see are Freddy's eyes glowing behind this little girl that's running away from it. And I remember sitting in the theater just thinking, that is a cool shot. That is probably the coolest shot we're ever going to get out of one of these movies. The other thing I kind of enjoyed about this movie is the inclusion of our new villain, Marionette. Now, for the gamers out there, you know that Marionette made her first appearance in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the original video game, so it makes sense that she is here. Her backstory is pretty much the same, even right down to the name of the spirit inside of Marionette, which, you know, I'll keep under my hat for now. But a lot of what they did with Marionette worked for me. I liked how whenever the spirit of Marionette possessed someone in this movie, and yes, we get actual possession in this movie. That's kind of new to this franchise, but for whatever it's worth, I kind of liked it. Believe it or not, I kind of liked how when Marionette possessed someone, they took up the look of Marionette, and it just worked for me. But unfortunately, that's all that works for me about this movie is the cold open and the use of Marionette. Otherwise, this movie is just a waste of time. Like I said, not scary, not atmospheric, not tense, boring kills, not much of a score to speak of. It was nice to see Wayne Knight in this one. 90s TV fans will remember Wayne Knight as Newman on the Seinfeld show. And whenever he's in a movie, you know he's going to play a giant piece of shit. And guess what? He plays a giant piece of shit in this movie, and he does it really well. It's kind of like we were talking about on the main show, how David Hess is one of cinema's greatest douchebags, and Wayne Knight is definitely making a run for that. So I always appreciate seeing him. He always puts a smile on my face. Not that I'm a Seinfeld fan. I don't like Seinfeld at all. But Wayne Knight, as an actor, I've always found him to be fairly charming. And like I said, just a really good cinematic asshole. So, and like I said, he continues that streak here. But ultimately, this movie just leaves you wanting so much more. Like, if you're a fan of the original games, like I said, you're in your 30s now. You don't want to watch a PG-13 horror movie. It's just not what we're looking for. So I question the filmmakers at Blumhouse, like, who are you making this game for? Are you making it for new Five Nights at Freddy's fans? Or are you making it for the classic Five Nights at Freddy's fans? Because you very obviously are missing the point of the original games, like I said. So, we get pretty much the entire surviving cast of the first movie is back here. We've got Mike, our security guard. We've got his little sister Abby. We've got, the ex-cop Vanessa, who of course was the daughter of William Afton, Matthew Lillard's character in the first movie, who wore the Springtrap costume. We do actually get to see a little bit more of Matthew Lillard in this one in flashbacks from when Vanessa was a younger girl. And I like Matthew Lillard for the most part. I mean, I'll forever be a big fan of his because of SLC Punk, one of my favorite movies from the 90s. But we also get a surprise appearance from Skeet Ulrich. So I know that there was a little bit of buzz around the fact that these two were going to be in a horror movie together again. Well, that's a little bit of a misnomer because they're not together in this movie. They don't share a scene in any way, shape, or form. And honestly, Skeet is really only in one scene. And even with Skeet only being in one scene, he still has more screen time than Matthew Lillard, who is, the returning big bad of the movie. Not that he's in this movie, but like I said, in flashbacks. So yeah, the whole Matthew Lillard Skeet Ulrich thing just kind of fizzled out once you watch the movie and realize they're not actually acting together. Maybe we'll get them together in what I'm assuming will be the third movie, especially considering the way this one ends, which again, I'll keep under my hat for now. But yeah, overall, it's just a lot of the same trappings as the first movie. If you like the first one, there's no reason you won't like this one. If you hated the first one like I did, then there's no reason you won't hate this one. But like I said, for whatever it's worth, I found this one to be ever so slightly more entertaining. A couple of the horror set pieces that I already described kind of worked for me. So despite all of that, this is still a very flawed movie, barely watchable. And if you are a hardcore fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't see how this movie doesn't just infuriate you. We also do get a quick appearance of DJ Music Man, who's made his first appearance. He was in Security Breach. That's right. Security Breach was his first appearance. We only get to see him briefly during a chase sequence where he's on top of somebody's car. I think it's Vanessa's car, basically trying to get in there. So it's a quick appearance, but it's still cool to see other characters outside of our main four, Bonnie, Chica, Freddy, and Foxy. So I'm always down to see more characters, and there's a slew more characters. I mean, if you just go by the Funko Pops, they haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg with the amount of characters that are in these games. And then the ones that I'm familiar with, it's a large number as well, on top of the fact that I haven't played a new Five Nights at Freddy's game in probably like a decade now. So there's probably a whole slew more characters that I don't know about. So like I said, overall, this is pretty much just a rehash of the second with maybe some slightly more supernatural elements than we got in the first one, and an ending that, depending on the type of movie viewer that you are, might leave you incredibly infuriated the way it did with me. But obviously, when we get to the walkthrough, I'll explain why this ending pissed me off so much. But yeah, overall, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, just a lot more of the same. So at the risk of saying too much, I'll go ahead and send it back to Mike.
Okay. We will now send it over to Dawn for your general thoughts.
All right. Well, I liked the original Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm not going to say it was great by any means, but as a gateway PG-13 watered down, entry level genre fare, I've seen a lot worse. I do like a lot of the setups in that one. I do like a lot of the lore that they established, but yeah, when it comes to the actual horror of the situation, it wasn't, that well done. And a lot of the second act just kind of took a lot of the tension out of the film for me, with all the extraneous nonsense and family drama that they kind of piled into it, and spending time away from the pizzeria, it just kind of dragged the film on a little bit. So I kind of do like the fact that this one establishes itself more in the pizzeria. I mean, I honestly can't remember much times that we're actually out of it. Um, I like that it kind of keeps it there. It kind of localizes everything. We follow up on what's gone on. It's like a year. Even though there's like 2 or 3 years passed since the film itself, in the movie universe, it's like a year later. So everything's still kind of. It feels logical that they would undertake what they do in here. I like the way that it brings them back to the pizzeria. It keeps them there, and we get the main characters back once again. But yeah, other than that, I really can't say much for this one. The animatronics are on screen a lot, but you don't really get to do anything with them. A lot of what they do isn't really that interesting anyway. The set pieces are just kind of bland, and especially in the second, in like leading into the third act, it just starts feeling repetitive all over. It kind of just feels like, okay, well, all of a sudden we're going to go down this hallway, and then all of a sudden, these glaring eyes are going to pop out of the darkness, and you're going to hear the crunching of the metal and the twisting of you know, the robotic creations just stomping around in the area, and you're going to have to get away from them before they kill you off screen. And it just doesn't have any kind of impact. It just lacks this bite and this urgency, and despite the fact that nothing that we don't really leave, you don't really feel tense at all. Like you don't really get the idea that they're in danger. You don't get the sense that any of the characters are all that in danger. You know who's gonna get killed off pretty easily. I don't have any real connection to anybody either. You don't really care about the returning characters because well, they're not going to kill them off. It's a PG-13 film, and once they start killing people off screen, or you start seeing everybody just disappear and never seen again, it's like you kind of start realizing that it's not going to be that kind of film at all. So it kind of just lessens the tension. Yeah, it it's an okay idea. If you would have given this a little bit more stakes, if you would have given us a little bit more reason to care about the group trapped inside, and put some gore into this, it wouldn't have been a bad one. I probably would have liked it a little bit more, but it just feels so watered down and toothless that it's kind of hard to just remain invested in what's going on. We don't get much of the teen romance stuff that I figured they were going to do with the two new characters, but yeah, there's very little about this one that kind of stands out at all. I really can't even remember, much of anything that took place in the film. I mean, the cold open, like Venom said, is one of the most original parts of this, and this is only because, it's the first one. So it's the one that everything else kind of copies itself off of. So, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say it's a useless film, but it's just kind of an unimportant one. And I really can't say that you're going to miss much of anything from not watching it. I mean, you know, we're heading into the final weeks of, we're heading into the final weeks of the year, and everybody's collating their lists and gathering year-end rankings. This can wait till January. There's very little reason to put aside stuff that you've been waiting all year to watch to get this one in. Wait until January. I think that's kind of like the best thing about this. Or put it aside for your kids while you're doing something else. But yeah, I wouldn't make this a priority. I wouldn't make this an urgent watch. There's just not enough here to really grab onto. I mean, an okay setup, a few decent ideas at play. That's not really enough at this stage of the year. So yeah, I can't say I hated it. I probably liked it a little bit more than Venom, but yeah, I really can't say that this has much going for it. So yeah, I guess back to you, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, to me, this movie just felt like it was made for the younger demographic fans of the game. So I took my daughter to see this one, just like the first one, and she kind of liked it for the most part, but it was mainly because she knew all the references and the lore from the game, and she would kind of like whisper it to me to because I'm familiar with the game vaguely enough. I know what the game is. I've watched my kids play it, but other than that, I don't know like the details of like plots and like how the different games connect and all the plots and that. So to me, that's probably why when you look at like a Rotten Tomatoes or an aggregate, like the critic score is low because overall I don't think it's that good of a movie. But then the younger demographic that is just there to see Five Nights at Freddy characters on the big screen, it's probably doing enough for them to say they liked it. Um, I would say there's more animatronic stuff in this one, but at the same time, it's almost overexposed to where it stops really being scary at some point because they're just kind of on the screen with no no consequence. They're just kind of there for a large portion of the movie. I still think it mostly largely works when it's inside the pizza place. This we get some story expansion, I guess, but like I don't think it's that like interesting or good. I mean, just these movies are mostly, hey, get tracked or get stalked by animatronics and they do bad things to people. But because it's PG-13 and it looks like they're aiming for a younger demographic, you're not going to get much gore or even on-screen death. It's going to be the classic, like the animatronics close in on the person, you hear a scream and fade to black or a edit to something else. That's just how it's going to be, it seems like. So yeah, I thought the first one was not that good. I would rank them about the same. Maybe I would give this one a little bit of a better score just because there's more like animatronic stuff going on. Um, and I did think the cold opening was pretty good, pretty effective, but when that's like all you got and you just kind of like repeat that over and over, it does lose effectiveness as it goes on. This is, it's not really my cup of tea of a movie. I probably wouldn't have even seen it if it wasn't the only horror movie in theaters this week and having a daughter that wanted to go see it. So that's the main reason I went. Um, but yeah, I didn't look at the box office to see, but I'm assuming it made money enough to get a third one because it looks like they set up for another one. There's tons of FNAF games, so I'm sure they have tons of lore to draw from. I know there was a mid-credit scene with some audio, and my daughter was like telling me that she thinks it's a certain character that shows up later in the games. I don't even remember, but like, like through her eyes, the eyes of a 13-year-old kid, I guess it did enough. So if like that's who the main demographic and target audience is and they liked it, fine. Like I'm not gonna tell them they're wrong for liking it. But for me, it's not my thing really. Outside of the fact that like, yeah, the animatronics look kind of cool, but that's not enough to make a movie good. So yeah, no, I would say, yeah, I think Venom said it. Like, whatever you thought of the first one, I assume your score on this one would be about the same. It's just more of what you got in the first one, with maybe a little bit of attempt to like expand the lore and story with added characters that show up in like following chapters of the game. Um, so yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. Back to you, Venom.
Yeah, I don't even really know what else to say about this thing. It's like as a Five Nights at Freddy's the game fan, obviously I'm incredibly disappointed with these movies. Just like I said, I'm just sitting here questioning who these movies are made for. Like I said, most of us who played the first two games are, in their 30s or older, yet it seems like he's making movies for teenagers, which is fine. There's still teens, younger adults that are still playing these games. And obviously with Mike's story about taking his daughter, obviously the younger generation is still into it. But you would think if you made something more for adults, you might, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to, I can't say that the movie would have made more money necessarily if you actually made it rated R and made it gory and actually made it for fans of the original games, because it's sitting, like I said, it's sitting at over 55 million for, you know, the opening weekend, which is insane for me to say for a movie that obviously I agree with the critic score on this one, not the fan score. I mean, the fan score, I have no idea where that's coming from, though I did watch multiple reviews on YouTube before I jumped on here, and it seems like the response is mostly positive from the fans. I did see a couple of reviews where they kind of agreed with us that it wasn't a very good movie and, you know, it doesn't really do anything for the lore, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't do much for the franchise. But yeah, most of the reviews I listen to, holy shit, people are loving this. And again, it's younger reviewers that are doing it. Reviewers my age are not fans of this movie. But when you watch like the 20 and young 30 somethings that review horror, they seem to be universally loving it. So good for Blumhouse, I guess. He's got himself a hit. He doesn't have a hit with older horror movie audiences, but at least with the younger ones, he seems to have hit a home run. So it's very obviously, you know, that we'll be getting a third one. And I don't know how happy any of us are about that, knowing that we're gonna have to watch a third one of these fucking movies in a year or two. But you know, what are you gonna do?
I'd rather watch this than a third Strangers film.
Oh God, yes. I will give you that any day of the week. I will watch this 50 more times before I have to watch another goddamn Strangers movie, even though I'm sure we'll have to for this damn show, but that's okay. I mean, you know, you take the good with the bad with podcasting, and sometimes the bad just seems like there's a lot. But ultimately, you know, this movie, if you're a younger horror fan who's still kind of getting their feet wet in the genre, you're probably going to love this movie, and that's great. It's good that this filmmaker was able to find an audience. It, you know, and it seems to be an audience that has more dispensable income now. I mean, I remember in the 80s when they put out kids movies, they weren't necessarily always the biggest successes. Nowadays, it seems like it's almost ritualistic that when a family movie comes out, whole families are going out to see it, you know, parents, grandparents, kids, which of course is making these movies money. So, you know, they've got a formula and it's working for them. So good for them, but it doesn't work for me. So sad for me because I have to sit through this stuff. Anyway, I'm going to assume that my co-hosts probably don't have too much to add before we get into the walkthrough. And I do want to apologize, folks. I saw this movie 4 days ago now. I actually saw a pre-release screener last Thursday, and I've already forgotten half the movie. So that probably tells you a lot about what's happening. On top of the fact that I've watched a lot of better movies since then that have kind of pushed Five Nights at Freddy's 2 out of my head a little bit. So I'm going to do the best I can with this walkthrough, but ultimately, I think my co-hosts will appreciate if I make this as quick as possible. So let's go ahead and get into it. Our movie starts 30 years in the past. We are at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We find out in this movie that the Five Nights at Freddy's location that is in the first movie is not the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. There actually was an original restaurant where William Afton, you know, was the manager. He ran it, blah, blah, blah. And our cold open starts with a birthday party, of course, at Freddy Fazbear's. We see a little girl named Shannon who is basically just sitting at the edge of the stage waiting for her favorite animatronic to make an appearance, to the point that she's actually ignoring all the friends at the birthday party that she's attending. And of course, whose birthday is it? It's a little blonde girl named Vanessa. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it is our Vanessa, the ex-cop and Matthew Lillard's daughter from the first movie. We see that when she was younger, and obviously she's going to be at she's going to have her birthday at Freddy Fazbear's because her father runs the damn thing. So she tries to get Shannon to come, Charlotte, excuse me. I keep saying Shannon. Charlotte is the name of the little girl in question. Little Vanessa basically tries to get her to come back to the party. Reluctantly, Charlotte goes back to the party, sings happy birthday to Vanessa. But then while they're all eating cake, Charlotte notices that a little boy walks into a back room. She sees that there's a Freddy Fazbear animatronic that's basically beckoning this little kid to follow him back there. She sees this and she tries to get help. This scene is so infuriating to me. Like, nowadays with helicopter parents, it's like if a little kid says that they need help, you've got 18 sets of parents coming to the rescue to save this child. But apparently in the 80s, these parents just didn't give a shit. Literally, one of them told the little girl, excuse me, adults are speaking, please leave us alone. Like, this little girl is crying, fucking crying and asking for help, and all these adults are just indifferent. It's almost like it's Dairy Maine or something where the adults are indifferent to the evil that's happening. I don't know. The scene was infuriating. Anyway, Charlotte decides to just go back there by herself since none of the adults are going to help her. She ends up finding a room where we see Freddy Fazbear sharpening a knife at a sink. And when she looks over, she sees the little boy that walked back there, and he's passed out on the floor. He is unconscious, or could be dead already for all we know. As it turns out, he is just unconscious. And Charlotte helps him tries to help him out of the back room. And this is where we get that great scene where literally this scene alone is better than the entirety of the first movie, which is so insane to me. But yeah, we get this quick little chase sequence, which, as I described earlier, it's Freddy Fazbear, or should I say William Afton, inside of the Freddy Fazbear costume, chasing little Charlotte. And with the glowing eyes behind her in a darkened hallway, it just looked really, really cool. She does eventually make it back to the main room, and she's holding the little boy in her arms, who's still kind of coming to, like, he's very obviously not dead. So when the little boy wakes up, he runs to his parents' arms, and the parents are like, what happened? You know, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly the camera kind of spins around to the back of Charlotte, and it shows that Charlotte actually has 3 stab wounds in her back, and she falls over dead. And she actually, what's kind of, I don't know if it's poetic or not, but literally the moment that she dies, the animatronic that she was waiting to appear, Marionette, ends up showing up. The trap door opens, Charlotte's dead body falls down into the trap door, and then when Marionette rises from under the stage, she's holding Charlotte's dead body in her arms. So that's kind of the setup of our story now. Fast forward 30 years, we see that Mike and Abby are still, living at the same house. They're still surviving. Abby obviously has a lot better attitude about, living with Mike, obviously, after all the events of the first movie. And she's even taken up an interest in robotics. And based on that interest in robotics, she wants to join her school's science fair. Now, this is where Wayne Knight comes in as Mr. Berg. He is the science teacher for Abby's class. And apparently Mr. Berg doesn't want Abby in the contest. Like, he actually tries to convince her to not show up. And this is after he gave the class a speech, basically telling them that if they didn't show up for the science fair, that they were going to get Fs. I don't know, for the day or for participation or whatever the case may be. But he literally said, anyone who doesn't show up is getting an F. And then literally 30 seconds later, he tells Abby, well, maybe it's better that you don't go. You're still kind of dealing with everything that happened to you and your brother last year, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it's Wayne Knight being the piece of shit that Wayne Knight is. So, kudos there. She eventually leaves upset. She can't get her robot. She basically makes a Bonnie, a little, maybe 1 to 2 foot tall, little robot, little remote control bot that she's made. And, she's proud of it, obviously, but she can't get it to work, blah, blah, blah. We'll get past this. Once again, we are reintroduced to Vanessa. At this point, Vanessa is still on leave. She is not a cop. She's, basically taking therapy sessions and just trying to get back to a normal mental state so that she can get back to work. At least from what I remember in the movie, she wasn't officially fired or terminated from her job. I could swear that she mentioned that she was on a medical leave. So obviously her and Mike, after the events of the first movie, they're a little romantic in a sense, but thankfully they don't push it down our throats. We basically just get one scene of Mike and Vanessa going on a first date, and that's pretty much the extent of it. We find out that, or should I say, Abby is so depressed about not being able to see her friends or talk to her friends anymore that she basically wants to go back to the restaurant, to the Freddy Fazbear's from the first movie. Her brother keeps telling her that, yeah, we'll go back someday. I'll fix them and you can have your friends back and blah, blah, blah. Obviously just giving Abby lip service. But eventually, Abby and Mike, just to appease Abby, to kind of, put her in a better headspace, basically takes her to Freddy Fazbear's and reveals that he's already been there and he's already fixed the animatronics. Yes, our original 4 characters are fixed. They're up on stage. They're looking good. And, Mike basically surprises Abby with that. But of course, the animatronics aren't speaking to her or anything. While there, she finds this, if you guys remember the Speak and Say toy that it used to, like, you'd point it at an animal and then pull the drawstring and it would say, the cow goes moo, one of those things. Well, it's kind of like a Freddy Fazbear version of that, where, she can kind of talk, quote unquote, talk to the characters from Freddy Fazbear, and they'll talk back to her. Now, that evening, we find out that there is a YouTube ghost hunting channel that's going to be doing a session at Freddy Fazbear's. But they're not going to the one that Abby and Mike have been to. They're going to the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, like I said. And this one, the original, is a lot bigger. It's actually got like a lazy river in it, where it was like a boat ride where the kids would get in these little boats and just ride around the restaurant on a little river. Very, what's the name of that restaurant from South Park? I can't think of it, but the restaurant that had all the like cool activities and shit like that. It seems like that original Freddy Fazbear's, they spared no expense and, had a lot more stuff in there than the one that we spent the last movie at. Now, the leader of this group of paranormal investigators is named Lisa. She's basically the host, and she's the one who really wants to get in here to do this investigation. While they're, of course, while they're there. Now, what's funny is that she says she's meeting the security guard named Mike. So obviously, as the horror movie viewers and familiar with the first movie, we assume that they're speaking about Josh Hutcherson, our main character, Mike, from the first movie. But then some other guy shows up that we don't recognize, and he's named Michael. He says, "Oh, I prefer to be called Michael." And we see like his face. He's definitely got like an evil tint to his face. Like he's doing something that he probably shouldn't be. Well, of course, the paranormal investigators get attacked while they're there. One of them gets attacked by a bunch of little marionette dolls, like a couple of dozen of them come to life and attack this one guy. Another one, I think the other guy dies off screen, if I remember correctly. But then Lisa, the leader of the group, ends up finding the marionette, the original marionette animatronic. And as it turns out, the marionette is possessed. It's still possessed by a child spirit, but it is not any of the kids that we know and love from the first movie. No, my friends, it is Charlotte. Yes, the girl who died in our cold open is now a, vengeful spirit that possesses the marionette doll. While this girl, Lisa, is at this Freddy Fazbear's, she is attacked by Marionette, and then Marionette basically possesses her. Or, I mean, you could say Marionette or you could say Charlotte. I think it's more accurate to say Charlotte possesses this girl. And like I said, when someone is possessed by Charlotte, they take up the look of the Marionette. Like they get a big red cheek, what's it called? Like rouge on their face. Their eyes get really big. They've got long ass fingernails like the animatronic does. It actually is almost kind of cool. Like I said, it's one of only two things I like in this entire movie. And sadly, at this point, we're only about 15, 20 minutes into the movie, and both things have already gone by. So the rest of the movie is just a slag for me. Anyway, after Lisa gets out, or yeah, you know, after Lisa gets possessed, I should say, by Charlotte, she decides to go to the Freddy Fazbear's that was from the first movie, to try to find those animatronics, the ones that are still there and potentially still possessed by these kids. What Lisa, or you know, Lisa possessed by Charlotte does is she uses like Wi-Fi and remote technology to control these animatronics. So she basically, what ends up happening is Vanessa ends up visiting the restaurant, Freddy's Fazbear's. She ends up getting attacked by Charlotte, and Charlotte forces her to give her the code to disable the security measure on the animatronics. Basically, all the original animatronics have a security measure that they basically, their power cells drain if they leave the perimeter of the restaurant. So if they try to leave the restaurant, they basically fall over and, you know, they have no power. Like I said, Charlotte, or Lisa possessed by Charlotte, is able to attack Vanessa until Vanessa basically threatens Abby's life and says, well, I can kill Abby if you would prefer that. Of course, Vanessa doesn't want that. So she gives Charlotte the code. Abby, being spoken to by supposedly her Chica, enters the code herself. And like I said, the security perimeter is disabled, and now these animatronics can now leave. And as it turns out, there is a festival that's going to be going on in the coming days called Faz Fest. Yes, somehow Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has developed so much of a cult following. And mind you, because of the police constantly covering up all the crimes that have occurred at the various Freddy Fazbear restaurants, most people still have a positive opinion of Freddy Fazbear's. So they're having this Fazbear Fest where, you know, the characters are going to be there and everybody's going to be there celebrating, you know, the history, you know, the 30th anniversary, I guess, of the original Freddy Fazbear's, blah, blah, blah. So you kind of know where that's going. And unfortunately, even if you know where it's going, it's still going to be very disappointing, because I'm sure I can guarantee that Don was expecting the siege that I was expecting, those big public massacres that we get in some
that would have that's way too extreme for a PG-13.
Valid. Yeah, I mean, obviously the kills can't be too juicy in a PG-13 movie, but yeah, I was still expecting some kind of rampage.
I would have wanted that. I mean, like I said, if this was in the hands of somebody that would have delivered like a harder edged film, yeah, that probably would have occurred.
Yeah, then I would have loved it, because I generally love that kind of thing when a horror villain finds himself in a big crowd and I mean they just start decimating people. Think of Jason at the party in Freddy versus Jason, where Jason is able to just go around hacking people left and right. It's fucking awesome. Anyway, we do end up getting a little bit of a mini siege at the fest, but like I said, it's a PG-13 movie. And it's a pretty disappointing scene, sadly. Not a lot of gore, not a lot of blood, despite the fact that multiple people in this movie had their heads crushed. We don't see shit. I mean, we get the sound effect of skull breaking, but that's about all we get, sadly. I think one person gets their head pulled completely off at one point. We don't get to see shit again, so obviously PG-13. Anyway, let's see. Fast forward. We find out that Vanessa is still dealing with mental health issues from the events of the first movie, plus from her childhood. We get a flashback scene of Matthew Lillard as William Afton, of course, Vanessa's father, and he's basically stalking her in her own house, basically forcing her to be part of the family business, if you will. Not that Freddy Fazbear's is the family business, but the business of murder, if you will. She has, a nightmare about the whole thing, and that's pretty much the only time we get to see Matthew Lillard in this movie. So it's a quick scene, unfortunately. So, and mind you, you probably notice I haven't mentioned Mike much in this movie. For a guy who took up the majority of the screen time in the first movie, he's barely in this movie. This movie is definitely more about Abby, Vanessa, and Charlotte more than anything, and Marionette, of course, or Charlotte as Marionette. Mike plays not a very big role here. Probably his biggest scene in this movie is when he finds a flyer at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that says Freddy Fazbear's is for murder or something like that. Just a very cryptic flyer, and it's got a phone number at the bottom. Mike decides to grab the flyer and call, and as it turns out, it is Charlotte's father, played by Skeet Ulrich. Yes. So the connection between Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich in this movie is that Matthew Lillard murdered Skeet Ulrich's only daughter. So there you go. Not exactly, buddy in this movie by any stretch, but there you go. So after we get that reveal, basically Mike gets information from Skeet about the Marionette and events of that day when Charlotte was murdered and how the police just kind of buried it. They ended up not even pressing any charges. They tried to say that it was an accidental death because the little girl snuck into a restricted area that she wasn't supposed to get into. Folks, can anybody out there explain to me how a little girl gets 3 stab wounds in her back by fucking accident? Yeah. Convenient plot devices are convenient, aren't they? Anyway, just another reason to hate this movie. Everything is so convenient in this movie. It just irks the shit out of me. Like I said, it starts with the fact that Vanessa is the little girl at the birthday party at the cold open, which is just, come on, guys. You don't have to connect every fucking dot, Anyway, like I said, basically, Marionette is able to release the animatronics, and mind you, these are basically animatronics that are controlled by Charlotte. It is not the spirits of the little kids from the first movie. They are still trapped at the original, or not the original, but at the Freddy Fazbear's from the first movie. So when Abby sees Bonnie and Chica and them walking around, she thinks, oh, it's my friends, yay. But of course, it's not their friends, because then they go on a little bit of a mini rampage. Eventually, we get the motivation for Charlotte and why she's killing all these people. It's not because they had ties to Freddy Fazbear. It's not that she's just randomly killing people. Charlotte blames adults. She blames parents for what happened to her because she was trying to get help. If you remember, as I described that cold open, she was trying to get help from all the parents, but they all ignored her to the point where they literally told her to shut up and leave us alone. So she blames them for her death. So she is now going around getting revenge on parents specifically, not the specific parents from this movie, because obviously at this point they're in their 60s. Don't forget, this is 30 years later. She's just going after parents in general, which is a very odd motivation. But again, if you realize that Charlotte was probably 11 or 12 years old when she died, and now she's an angry, vengeful spirit with the intelligence of an 11 or 12-year-old, I guess you can kind of see how she would connect the dots and say, the parents are why I'm dead. So there's her motivation. She's going around trying to kill parents, though she doesn't have any problem killing kids. Not that she has the opportunity to kill any kids in this movie, but it definitely seems like she would have no problem if a kid got in her way. I mean, she's obviously trying to kill Abby. So, there you go. Fast forward a little bit, multiple set pieces, blah, blah, blah. Let's go ahead and get to our finale. Basically, while the animatronics are on their little mini rampage going around killing people, breaking into houses and killing people, Mike is back at the original Freddy Fazbear's at the computer trying to disconnect the Wi-Fi connection, or whatever it is, whatever connection that they have that Charlotte has with the animatronics. And of course, just as one of the animatronics is about to kill Abby, he, of course, is able to deactivate their control, and now Charlotte has lost control of those animatronics. Unfortunately, that's only briefly, though, because after a few minutes, the animatronics end up waking up again, or at least one of them does, if I remember correctly, and is basically waiting for them at Mike and Abby's house. We get a set piece where and then our finale basically takes place at Mike and Abby's house, where Charlotte, or Marionette as Charlotte, basically attacks everybody. I don't remember exactly how they're able to win the day, if you will. Like I said, it's just one of those things that I completely forgot about, mercifully. But eventually they are able to defeat Marionette, not permanently, just defeat her. That's what it is. Marionette then decides to get out of Lisa's body and possess Abby. So for a very brief time during this finale, Abby herself is possessed by Marionette, and she's got that look, like I said, with the big rosy cheeks, the long nails, and the black eyes. It just, kind of cool looking. At least it worked for me anyway. Eventually, they're able to exorcise Charlotte from Abby. I don't remember exactly how, but eventually one of Mike's friends shows up and kind of assists them. This is a guy that's helping Mike paint his house. We meet him earlier in the film. Again, he shows up and kind of helps Vanessa and Mike save the day. Once they think that, Abby is fine. Like I said, they exorcise Charlotte from Abby. Abby's fine. But then when Vanessa goes in for a hug with Mike, Mike pushes her back and says, you know what? Stay the fuck away from me. You're nothing but bad luck. You've done nothing but hurt my family. I'm still trying to put the pieces together, and you're not helping. And which, of course, and so then we see Mike, Abby, and Mike's friend all leave. They leave Vanessa alone in the house, and the last thing we see is the spirit of Marionette enter Vanessa. And now our movie ends, and yes, our fucking movie ends with a cliffhanger, which I fucking hate. I can't stand cinematic cliffhangers. I'm sorry. If you're not The Empire Strikes Back, then shut the fuck up with your cliffhangers, all right? Fine, it's going to be a trilogy. All right, whatever. But Jesus Christ, give me at least a fucking ending to this movie. We don't even get an ending. We just get Vanessa gets possessed by Marionette, and the screen goes to black. And then we get a couple of mid-credit scenes. One of them is just audio where we hear Skeet Ulrich's voice calling. I forget. I'm not sure who he's calling. He might be calling Mike, but he basically leaves a voicemail saying that Marionette is coming after him now, and that, he has an idea of how they might be able to defeat it. And that's kind of the end of that. It definitely does kind of allude to another character from deeper in the Five Nights at Freddy's lore. But again, it's just theories at this point, so I'm just going to leave it alone. If you're a gamer, especially, if you're a hardcore fan of Five Nights at Freddy's and you saw this movie, just like Mike said with his daughter, you're probably going to know what they're alluding to with this one. We get some more credits, and then we get another mid-credit scene where we get three guys basically breaking in to the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from the first movie. Now, during the events of this movie, we find out that William Afton, if you remember, Matthew Lillard as Springtrap in the first movie, he ends up getting killed when his suit kind of turns on him and crushes his insides. Well, as it turns out, that room that he died in was a secret room that the police and the community never knew about. So no one ever found Springtrap's body. He's basically still in this room. Well, these three guys break into the Freddy Fazbear's. We find out from one of them that they're demolishing the place the next day. So these guys are basically just trying to find, I think they're putting on a Halloween haunt, if I remember. And they're just trying to find like cool stuff, like, stuff that might remind people of Freddy Fazbear's for their haunt. But one of them finds the secret room by accident, and they find Springtrap's body. They don't realize that there's a body inside of that suit, that Matthew Lillard's body is still in there. They just think that it's a completely intact original animatronics. So they're all excited. They cover it with plastic and then they walk away to go get the truck so that they can, get that thing into the back. While they're gone, one of the eyes on Springtrap lights up, of course, setting up the return of Springtrap for the next movie. And actually, it's not Springtrap, but again, if you're a gamer, you're going to know what I'm talking about, because Springtrap in the games does make a reappearance, but with a different name. So again, I'm just going to leave that under my hat. But yeah, there you go. That's the end of our fucking boring ass movie that, as I've already said, I do feel like this one is maybe a half a step better than the first one. I said this with Troll 2 recently on the latest episode of Creature Comforts, where I like when sequels have the same cast from the first movie, because then we don't have to waste any time with character development. And I'll give this movie the same credit. Since you brought back the entirety of the surviving cast from the first movie, we don't have to waste time. I mean, that's probably why Mike gets barely any screen time in this movie. Like literally the scene at the computer and the scene where he's talking to Skeet Ulrich are probably the only two major scenes that he's really in this movie, which is, kind of disappointing if you're a fan of that character anyway. So, hopefully for fans of the character, we get more of him in the third one, in the very obvious third movie that we're going to be getting, because not only does this movie end with one fucking cliffhanger, it ends with two. God damn it. Fuck this movie for having cliffhangers. Like I said, folks, I can't stand when movies know that they're going to be a trilogy and that middle chapter is just a dull, boring, like, why did we even sit through this? Yes, we do get a little bit more lore. Yes, we do get Marionette and a little bit of DJ Music Man. But ultimately, like Don mentioned earlier, unless you're really interested in this franchise and plan on finishing the trilogy, there's not really much reason to watch this one, sadly. So, yeah, I'm just going to say the second is just more of the first, with maybe slightly more heightened supernatural elements to it, as I mentioned earlier, and a couple of cool shots here and there, which at least, I mean, there's two scenes in here that I like, and that's two more scenes than I liked in the first movie. So that's a step above. And like I said in my social media post, if I actually stay awake for the whole 2 hours, I'm going to call it a small victory. And yes, I did stay awake for the entirety of the movie. So again, small victory. And I guess I will leave my thoughts at that and turn the mic over back to our fearless leader.
Okay. Yeah, so that's all we got to say about FNAF 2. Likely headed for a FNAF 3 after that box office report. So yeah, I guess with that said, that's gonna wrap up our thoughts on the movie. But what else do we have, if anything, for people to listen to? Venom, what?
Yes, we do have a new episode of Creature Comforts in the can. For the second time in our show's history, we have decided to do a brand new creature feature that just came out. For, longtime listeners of Creature Comforts, you remember that back in December of 2022, we did our first brand new creature feature on the show, which was, of course, Troll from Norway, which was presented on Netflix. Well, literally exactly 3 years later, on December 1st of this year, they dropped Troll 2 on Netflix, and we just reviewed it. We literally just recorded last night. I will be editing the show tomorrow and hopefully getting it out by not even the end of the week. Hopefully I have it out by midweek. As this is a new movie, I wanted to get the episode out as quick as possible. And for those who are worried, we actually do a spoiler-free review. The entire episode is spoiler-free. So if you haven't watched Troll 2 yet and you just want to get our thoughts before you sit down to watch it, it's safe to listen. It is completely spoiler-free. So check that out. Hopefully that'll be available as you hear this episode, but if not, it'll be available very shortly afterwards. That'll be, as I said, our December episode, which will close out 2025 for Creature Comforts. And that's pretty much all I've got. I don't have any more information on my two supposed guest spots that I have coming up. So as I get more information, obviously I will announce it here on Fresh Cuts. But that's about all I have. So yeah, back to you, Mike.
All right, Don, how about you?
Creature Comforts, as mentioned, should be able to hear that one sooner rather than later. Only other one I got is last episode of Joe Blow Horror Show, where we looked at Dead and Breakfast, the zombie comedy from the early 2000s. So I am waiting on a couple of guest spots that could potentially show up in the new year. I've had a few friends reach out to me about guesting on shows in the new year. It's going to be too late to get anything done before the holidays. So maybe I'll have something new, new-ish by then. But yeah, other than that, I'm not going to say anything because we don't know anything other than some guys have reached out and said, "Hey, you want in?" And I've said, "Yeah, sure." So yeah, those are the only things for me.
Okay, and for me, I got nothing. So nothing new to report. As far as the next episode of Fresh Cuts, I know this week the Silent Night, Deadly
Mm-hmm.
Night. I guess it's a remake or a re-envisioning. I like whatever they
Yeah,
refer to it
I think
as.
it's a remake. I think it's a remake because from what I heard, I don't think that they're gonna tie anything back into the 2012 one. I think they're gonna go back to the 84 one.
Okay, yeah,
Ah, retcon. Nice.
more or less.
No, no, I don't think it's a retcon. I think they're just ignoring that one.
Ah,
That's like a whole
gotcha.
new thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, more or less. Dude dressed as Santa killing people. What beyond that, we'll have to find out. But that's generally
yep.
what the movie's gonna be. So that
And it's kind of poignant that we're probably going to end the year on a Christmas horror movie, because after that, we don't have anything opening theatrical until January. I think it's either Primate or 28 Years Later. I can't remember which one is the first week in January, but one is the first week and one is the second week. So I would imagine Silent Night, Deadly Night will be our last real episode for 2025 before we start our couple of week prep for our top 10 show. So, yeah, I'll take it.
or sabbatical. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah. Good good week to end it on then. So we will be back with that in a week. So with that said, thanks everyone for listening. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
The real Five Nights at Freddy's movie is Willy's Wonderland. Do yourself a favor and check that out. I assure you, you're going to have more fun, especially if you're an adult horror fan. You're going to have more fun with that movie than Five Nights. So check it out.
Peace.